It is my pleasure to present our speaker for today, Reverend Glenn Stocking.
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Wonderful.
Good to see you and hear you. Norina is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. All right. I just can't start without taking just a moment to recognize the tragedy down in Surfside and just hold everyone in our thoughts and about that.
Yeah.
That hits my industry near and dear, and it's something that we have been educating ourselves on more and more this last couple of weeks. Our hearts go out to everyone down there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the subject for this week, the shadow on the wall. It's pretty common in our spiritual teaching to look at shadows and talk about shadows and all of those things related to it. But on my take, it's going to be a little interesting, I hope. I'm going to talk about, first of all, that, survivors of near-death experiences are often said to speak of seeing a pure, bright light that draws them toward it. The experience it's so well documented that the admonition, don't go toward the light, is commonly invoked to warn of a catastrophic danger ahead, implying not so much the end of a tunnel, but an oncoming train instead. This light is so intense, it's nearly irresistible. Of course, the light we're speaking of is a common representation of spirit. So when we think we are being returned to the spiritual whole, transcending from this human existence, a brilliant, pure light seems like a logical beacon that we would expect to see. So it's not, it seems logical that, that's what we would see, because that's kind of what we expect to see, isn't it? Some sort of brilliant white light to guide us home. We say that people light up our life with their presence. We enjoy having those people around. Like Minister Norina over here. We love seeing her when we have the opportunity to listen to her perform and speak. She lights up our life, and smart people shine with brilliance. We build lighthouses to guide ships and warn of dangerous waters. As expressions of spirit, we are the light. We are in the light. We are children of the light. All these light references referring to spirit being good things to have around us. But as humans, we often choose a different direction. Don't ask me why. We just do. Holmes writes in The Science of Mind that when we stand in the light, we cast a shadow across the pathway of our own experience. And he writes that Emerson advises that we get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. And he's talking about, we stand in the light and then we turn our back on it. So we're seeing that shadow. Our shadow is the absence of light and can be confused for the thing casting it. We see a person's shadow and we know a person must be connected to it. But the shadow is not the person, is it? Nor can we tell for certain which person the shadow represents. We cannot even be certain the shadow is a person, and not some convenient arrangement of foliage creating the illusion of a person. There are no shadows when we face into the light. We create shadows in our experiences when we turn away from the light, when we forget who and what we truly are, expressions of spirit. Shadows are powerful literary devices. And since I had shadows on my mind this week, it happens I stumbled across an old silent film. Never seen it before, never heard of it before, and it was about World War I U-boats. Oddly enough, titled Q-boats. Now, we won't get into the whole Q thing and what that stands for today, but I stumbled across this movie recently, and as the film opens, we see a shadow on the wall of a character coming down a staircase. Now, since this story is told from the point of view of the Allies, it is an ominous entry. It's slow and deliberate until finally the camera pulls back and the character coming down the staircase is the commander of the U-boat fleet coming into the planning room to announce to his boat captains how their campaign against Allied shipping is winning the war for the Kaiser. Everyone is upbeat. He is full of confidence, and everyone leaves the meeting anxious to bring home glory for the Emperor. Well, I hope I don't need to tell you that World War I did not turn out so well for the U-boat fleet. The movie ends with the same commander issuing his last order to his few remaining boat captains. The order is to surrender their boats to the British fleet. Then he's left alone. All the captains have gone. He looks around the war room one last time. And he goes back up the stairs. His shadow on the wall is all that's left of this once proud warrior. Again, in literary parlance, the 1937 Orson Welles radio program The Shadow told stories highlighting the underside of humanity. The hero slipping all too easily into the shadowy world where seemingly exceptional people demonstrated extremely poor lifestyle choices that led to their undoing. Morality tales showing how easily things can unravel when we turn away from the light, forego our spiritual selves, and choose to think God is not looking today. Ernest Holmes writes in The Science of Mind, we cannot cheat principle. Out of the slightest shadow of our most subtle concept, the hand writes and passes on, but the writing remains. And the only thing that can erase it is writing of a different character. There is no obstruction one cannot dissipate by the power of truth. When we go astray, we can only correct it by coming back to our true nature. We may think we've gotten away with our transgression. Our hand has moved on with no one the wiser, right? We cannot cheat principle. What we tell others is irrelevant. What we truly believe forms the foundation of our experiences. Plato in the 4th century BC, I think that's before computers, tells the story of people held in a cave where they could only see shadows of what went on outside. It's a much longer, complicated story. I invite you to look it up and read it. But basically, they were unable to see anyone else or even themselves, and so had only their own minds to interpret what they were seeing. Sort of like watching the same news channel all the time and never being able to hear other opinions or even see the actual facts about a story, just the shadows others want you to see. These cave people were eventually allowed to leave their cave, but were unable to recognize reality when they saw it. It did not match the story they had invented for themselves. Sound like anyone you know? Look around the table at Thanksgiving. You'll see some. Thomas More writes in A Care of the Soul, a soulful life is never without shadow. And some of the soul's power comes from its shadow qualities. If we want to live from our depths soulfully, then we will have to give up all pretense to innocence as the shadow grows darker. The chief reward of surrendering innocence so that the soul may be fully expressed is an increase of power. It may seem somewhat counterintuitive to say that our shadow may increase our power. And For some, the appeal may be, sure, I can have all the power I want as long as I don't care about the consequences. I can bully my way to the top as long as I don't mind being a bully. I think more was thinking along the lines of recognizing our ego and our human quirks that turn us away from the light from time to time, and just accepting that part of ourselves and dealing with it truthfully rather than repressing it or worse, denying it. We have a lot of consciousness around race relationship these days, and we all have to examine our past behaviors and find the balance between things we may have done differently, knowing what we know now and recognizing we have evolved so that those who may have once hurt us or those we may have hurt. We're not stuck in that past. We change. The people who hurt us change. The people we hurt have changed. All it takes to neutralize a shadow is a little light. Holmes writing again, it is beautiful and true thought to realize that every man stands in the shadow of a mighty mind, or every person in our evolution of language would have us say today. Every person stands in the shadow of a mighty mind, a pure intelligence, and a divine givingness. I thought it was interesting that Holmes uses the image of a shadow to describe the light of spirit that washes over all of us. This is where I say, don't overthink it. Holmes is perhaps just acknowledging that life is full of contradictions and challenges that force us to roll with the punches sometimes and trust our spiritual gyroscope to bring us back on course when the winds and currents take us on unexpected adventures. Holmes is still writing here when he says, sitting in the shadow we may not really believe that there is any sunshine. But the sun would be there all the time, and all the time we are in bondage, the real freedom exists. We can make up whatever story we want to believe. We can see what other people tell us or hear what other people tell us and just make stuff up. Our individual minds need to make sense out of the unsensible. Insanity is trying to make sense of something with insufficient or erroneous information. Our minds fill in the gaps. So when we only see shadows and not the reality, we make up stuff. We have to explain to ourselves what those shadows are. And what is obvious to the better informed eludes the undernourished. The most absurd explanation makes sense in a factual void. Would we believe in our hearts that it is the shadows that are real? Actual reality seems insane. The people who came out of the cave looked at the world and they go, that's not what's real. Those trees aren't real. Those people aren't real. No, the shadows on the wall are what's real. The stories we've made up to satisfy our ignorance, that's what's real. If we are focused on our shadow, with our backs to the light, our egos will fight to maintain our belief until the day comes when there's nothing left but the illusion of power, our shadow on the wall. Thank you.